My name is Mike. I'm a medical science liaison with Biohaven. Thank you so much for welcoming me to talk a little bit about the topic that's near and dear to my heart, and that is effective communication. For as long as I can remember, I've always loved talking. Ask any of my elementary and high school teachers, and they'd tell you that I liked talking a little too much. And so, fortunately, I landed in a career where I get to talk all day, every day to highly intelligent people who care about patients. I get to talk to external stakeholders, that is, the healthcare professionals that are out there in the healthcare community treating patients. And then I also get to talk to a lot of intelligent people who work for the pharmaceutical company. So, as a liaison, I'm bridging that gap between the two entities. But today, I'm thrilled to talk to you about effective communication, the art of effective communication. And when we really think about communication, don't let anybody fool you. It's an art. There's different styles, there's different flavors. Ask one person what their 10 tips are for effective communication. They're likely to give you some different things that they would focus on. But today, these are 10 tried and true tips that I've found have had a lasting impact in my personal and professional life. So I don't want this to be me monologuing up here for an hour or 50 minutes or whatever. So if you have questions, I'd love to keep this as a two-way street, keep it as conversational as possible. So don't be shy to interrupt me, throw your hand up, come off mute, and chime in or ask questions throughout this talk. This is a legal disclaimer. So I'm here representing myself. Even though I work for a pharmaceutical company, everything that we talk about in this, my views, the information, all of these opinions that I'm going to be throwing out there on the art of communication, these are all my own, and they don't represent those of Biohaven and their leadership and employees. So how did I get here? I'm going to do this as quickly as possible. I started off at a small private school in Pennsylvania called Gannon University up in Erie, Pennsylvania, right on Lake Erie, and loved science, thought I wanted to be a medical doctor. Then as I got close to senior year, I said, I don't know if I want that work-life balance. But I've always wanted a doctorate. So let's, switch course, let's pivot, let's go for a PhD. So I ended up at Texas A&M in 2012, started the PhD program in biochemistry. Then 5 years later, I graduate. And throughout that journey, I knew one thing. I did not want to do bench science ever again. I was done. I tapped out, pulled the ripcord. And so I needed to find an alternative career that was predicated on scientific communication. And lo and behold, I found the MSL career. Thank goodness for that, because this is my dream job. I love this job. We can talk a little bit more about details about that. But I went for my PhD program, luckily got in to my first MSL role at Otsuka Pharmaceutical, a phenomenal company. They took a chance on me. I had no MSL experience, and I have them to thank for everything, for bringing me on and trusting me in a role such as the MSL role. Then I get back to a small company because I wanted to move back to Austin, Texas. I landed at Pharmacosmos Therapeutics in hematology oncology. And then a mentor of mine, a trusted, respected mentor of mine, reached out to me, asked me to join her team at Biohaven Pharmaceuticals. And that's where I'm at currently. So I've been in the MSL role now for about 4.5 years. And so all of these tips that we're going to go over all have one common denominator, and that is communication. Communication is the spice of life. And no matter what your journey is, after you get out of pharm school at UT, you're going to be in a situation where you're going to need to communicate. And so a person cannot exist without communication. And so it stands the reason that it's an important skill to develop. So whether it be an interview for a fellowship, an interview for a full-time gig, whether you're going to be interested in going in the clinical setting and you're going to have to interact with patients, no matter where you go, you're going to have conflict resolution. There's going to be disagreements. You got to figure out ways diplomatically and respectfully to solve those. There's going to be work meetings. Sometimes you may have to give presentations, and you're going to be interacting with members of the clinical care team as a pharmacist. So no matter what, you're going to be communicating So, what ways can we fine tune this skill? So, the number one tip that we're going to start off with is finding your own individual voice and style. And for me, when I thought about this, what I have always done is I've always been inspired by other communicators. And so I just threw these pictures on here just to kind of spitball and throw something out there. But who do you view as an effective communicator? And then one step further than that, why do you find that individual as an effective communicator? I want to hear from some of you in the audience. Who do you look at as, wow, that person is an effective communicator? Come off mute. You're in a safe space. You can share.
One of our deans, Dean Ginsburg. She, when I first got into pharmacy school, she was like one of those people that I felt like really was able to kind of communicate what she was trying to get across, but also kind of almost like influence us to do the best that we can and to look for that passion that we have in pharmacy.
Great answer. So Dean Ginsburg, very cool. And who is that? I can't see based because I'm presenting.
Oh, my name is Jeff.
Jeff.
Mhm.
Thank you, Jeff. Who else on the call? Sharing is caring.
I guess right now off the top of my head, just like Brene Brown. She's like a very like philosophical, um, like I guess motivational speaker. She's pretty good. I like listening to her.
All right. And Jenny, you said Renee Brown?
Yes, Brene Brown. She does. Oh
Oh,
my gosh, what's the name of her? Kind of like I think she talks a lot about like vulnerability, effective communication, just like a lot of things like that.
awesome. So it sounds like you get inspiration just, hearing her talk.
Yes. Mhm.
Excellent. Yeah, you feel energized. You feel invigorated hearing these people talk. Excellent. For me, my guy, the man, the myth, the McConaughey, is somebody that I've always been fascinated with. I actually fell in love with Matthew McConaughey when he played Russ Cole on season one of True Detective. Hands down, the best single season of television ever. If any of you haven't seen it, that's your homework assignment. I know some
I
of you.
wholeheartedly agree.
Yes. Detective Russ Cole, he just completely fascinated me in that character. And then what happened was is I went down a rabbit hole because I was just so obsessed with that show and his character and how he portrayed him that I went down this rabbit hole and just watched a ton of interviews with Matthew McConaughey. And each interview that I saw with him, there was always a consistent picture of his communication style, very distinct, very unique. When he communicates, he's respectful, he's playful, he's philosophical, he's oh man, the list goes on. He's passionate when he talks. You can hear it in he's very emotive. He's folksy. So, in my opinion, he's never pretentious when he talks. He's always very down to earth, casual, and he is low key eloquent. He's kind of got that whiskey philosopher type style to him. So I just personally love listening to him speak. It just resonates with me. So, and I think it's great that some of you mentioned, specifically, Jeff, you mentioning Dean Ginsburg. This doesn't always have to apply to a celebrity, a historical figure, or a media personality. It can be people who are professors, friends, even. Maybe you have a buddy who, just tells the best stories. So I want you to keep your mind open as tip number one of trying to find somebody that inspires you as a communicator. Think critically about what it is about them that you idolize, and then try to take bits and pieces of those things to help you find your own voice. And so there are things about Matthew McConaughey that, like those characteristics that I kind of highlighted, that I always try to do whenever I'm communicating. I never want to be perceived as pretentious when I talk. So, and I can't help but being passionate, which is another reason why I just naturally resonate with him as a communicator. So find things about others that you look up to, really think about them, break them down, and then see if you can mold some of those things into your own personal style. That's tip number one. Tip number two, I don't know anybody who can talk about effective communication without talking about knowing your audience. This is universally applicable. It doesn't matter if you're at a party and you just met someone and you're just talking, around on the balcony, or if you're in an interview. All of this is always, you should always be thinking empathetically about, if I was in this person's shoes, would they understand whatever it is that I'm talking about? And number two, I always think about, when I'm talking to this person, if I were them, would I find me boring right now? And those are two things that I always am thinking about. It's, ingrained in the back of my subconscious that I'm always kind of thinking. So it doesn't matter if it's an interview, if it's a professional setting, if it's a social situation and you're just talking to somebody, it's always, what is their baseline knowledge? What are their credentials? What are their time constraints? What are they interested in? Is it a group setting? Is it a one-on-one setting? What about ethnic and cultural background? All of these things are ways that you can be an effective communicator. So if I bump into somebody, or and I just met them and we're just talking, maybe it's on a plane ride, and I'll always check to see, they may ask what I do, and I say, oh, I'm a medical science liaison for a pharmaceutical company. Have you ever heard of that role before? Do you know anybody who works in pharma? And I'm asking those questions because I need to know who I'm talking to. So maybe they say, no, I don't know anybody who works in pharma. Maybe they have negative perceptions of pharma. They wouldn't be the first person in the world. And so I know where they're at. And so when I communicate to them, because I know my audience, I can then meet them where they are. This is going to be essential for when all of you get out of pharm school and all of you do interviewing. You need to know, who are you interviewing with? What is their title? What is their role within the company or the organization that you're applying to? And you're going to have to do research to figure this stuff out. So knowing your audience. Tip number two, don't sleep on it. Tip number three. So this is something that, it was the number one lesson that I learned from my mom. And that is, I would always get yelled at by her. I'd always get lectured by her, because I would say something and she would always respond, it's not what you said, it's how you said it. And I can't tell you how many times I got lectured on that by my mom. And it makes sense when you really think about it. The content of what you're saying is just part of communication. And there's been a whole, host of studies that have looked at this exact concept about nonverbal communication and then verbal communication. And then when you think about verbal communication, you break that down into the words, the content of what you are delivering in that exchange. And then a lot of it comes down to your tone. And how does that tone land on the other person that you're talking to? Again, a lot of this comes down to thinking empathetically. Try to put yourself in the other person's shoes and always be thinking, how am I coming across to this person? And so tone can be a big thing. When you learn also to modulate your tone, your voice is an instrument. We don't think of it as an instrument, but it really is. There's ways that you can learn to be an effective communicator to modulate your tone. You can emphasize certain things. You can lower the voice. You can change the cadence of when you're speaking. All of these things are ways that you can fine tune the instrument that is your voice. And so nobody wants to come across, monotone, boring, uninteresting, unenthusiastic. I mean, maybe each of you, you don't have to say it, but maybe some of you can reflect and think of a lecture or a presentation that you've watched. And maybe the person that was giving it was extremely intelligent. They were an expert in this subject area. But for whatever reason, you were just checked out of whatever that lecture was, whatever that presentation was. And maybe you can reflect and maybe you can critically think about, maybe was it because how they were delivering their tone in communicating that message. And so we're all human beings. So all of these things play a role in what keeps our attention to somebody else who's talking. So finding ways to master your tone and optimize it in situations, that is a way to become an effective communicator. Before I go on to tip number 4, how are we doing here? Does anybody have any thoughts, questions?
Yeah, I just want to say the modulating tone part, like changing the cadence. I've never really thought about it, so I appreciate you including that.
Thanks. I believe that was Christopher.
It was, yes.
All right. Thanks, man. So yeah, this is something that I find is extremely useful. I mean, I do it in real life. Just and it's little things. I love giving examples because we can talk about all this in theory and concept, but it always helps me. I know, again, thinking empathetically, like if I was in the audience, I love hearing examples. So if I have like a call with an internal colleague, so somebody who works at my pharmaceutical company, whenever we hop on the Zoom call or whenever I answer their phone call, I'll modulate my tone in a way that I want to come across as playful and kind of, sunny and cheerful. So I'll call, somebody and I'll go, hey, Jasmine, or, well, howdy, Chris. And I'll do that just to be a silly goose because I want to lighten the mood. I mean, yes, we're both working, but it doesn't mean you have to be drab and bleak. You can have fun with this. So I do this a lot, and I find that it brings and summons out, kind of good emotions from the person that I'm talking to. Now, if I'm calling a physician or they're calling me to ask me about a medical question that they need some data and some information on, I don't, in that instance, I don't go, well, hey, how's it going, Dr. Jones? So you do it within reason, but yeah, it's ways modulating your tone and varying your cadence. I mean, think about the example of somebody like down there with the Ferris Bueller reference. I don't know if any of you love that movie. I'm a movie buff. That's one of my favorite movies. But that professor is just in that scene is just monotone. Bueller. So that's what you don't want to be. You don't want to be monotone. And so the way to get around that is you have fun with it. You slow down in certain points where you want to be dramatic, where you really want the audience to focus in on. And in other things, you want to be free flowing and smooth. So just my thoughts. Thank you, Christopher, for chiming in. This is one that I can't emphasize enough, and that is to be an effective communicator. I think people think that you see somebody and you think it's natural, it's organic, and that can be the case. Some people do naturally like to talk more than others. It's more in their element. But any good communicator is somebody who is prepared for that speech, that presentation, that lecture, this business meeting. And so what you see is you're seeing the tip of the iceberg. Whenever you see a compelling, captivating speaker, you're seeing the tip of the iceberg. But what you're not seeing is all the preparation, everything that is under the water, all that work, all that diligence, all that, tenacity and gumption to really make sure that that speech is going to go well or that presentation is going to go well. And this is going to apply again to any situation where it involves communication. And this applies obviously to interviews. For a lot of you out there who are going to be trying to apply to industry, you're probably thinking it's a catch-22. How is anybody going to give me an opportunity when I don't have experience in that field or in that role? And how am I going to stand out from other applicants who are also applying? This is how you will stand out. You will be better prepared and you will be more in-depthly researched than any other candidate out there. This is something that you can control. This should be empowering to you. And again, some people are more naturals communicators, but this is an art, meaning anybody can learn how to do this. Anybody can get better at this. I don't care how good of a communicator you are, you can always get better. So I do this a lot. I mean, for presentations, if I have a big presentation that I have to give as a medical science liaison, I'll write a script. Now, I'm not going to write a script for the entire presentation, but I will, if I have the time, I'll write a script for about like the first maybe 5 minutes of whatever presentation, because I want to get off to a great start. I want to make an awesome impression right from the get-go. I want to grab my audience and I want to capture and hold in the palm of my hand their attention. And to come across as a confident speaker, that's a way that I've found to get off to a good start, is preparing for that presentation by writing a script, taking the time to memorize it, rehearsing it, practicing it, verbalizing it out loud, finding a buddy, go over the first, couple minutes of my speech or my presentation, and just so that I can have eyes on me and I can practice it and see where am I tripping up in this. And then you go through and you revise and you get better. And each iteration, you're getting smoother, you're getting more polished. And so you get to a point where this is all the preparation that you are doing. And no one is going to see that. All they're going to see is the tip of the iceberg, and they're going to see the finished product of you delivering a compelling, captivating speech. So preparation, this is something that anybody can do, and you can do it better than people that you're going to be competing against in a job interview. You can research the company better than the other person. Then you'll be able to communicate it better. You'll be able to research the person you're talking to so that you know that they went to Tulane for their PhD and then they joined Eli Lilly straight out of that. You'll be able to talk about this in that interview, and the person you're talking to is going to be impressed. Again, I do this for my job as an MSL. If I'm going to meet a physician, when I shake their hand and I walk into their office, or I go to a steakhouse and I'm meeting them, I'll tell them that, I've done my homework on you and I watched your lecture on YouTube, the one that you gave at, APA or AAN, the American Academy of Neurology. And I'll talk about that. So preparation, enough on preparation. This one is a difficult one. And so this one, there's really no way you get better at it than through practice. So on the one hand, we just talked about preparing, going into it, knowing certain information, knowing how you want to kind of navigate the conversation around that information. But on the other hand, being open to adapting is also, I find, an amazing tip for being an effective communicator. And that is because you may go into it thinking that talking about this topic, may invigorate the other person you're talking to. And you may find out that they aren't responding in the way that you thought they would. And so do you double down and just stay on that one path? Or do you say, I'm going to pivot and maybe talk about something differently or communicate differently? The example I have on how adapting has been effective for me personally is there was a physician that I was meeting, and I was at a dinner meeting with him, and I was showing him data on my laptop. I was showing him graphs, charts, schematics, and his body language was just telling me that he's just not engaged. Eye contact wasn't there, fidgeting. And so I checked in with him and I said, Dr. Smith, just throwing out a hypothetical there. Dr. Smith, does everything making sense? Do you have any questions? It seems like there's something that's kind of off about what I'm talking about here. And he said, well, to be honest with you, I don't really put much stock in randomized controlled trials. And I'm like, oh, well, all right. Tell me more. What is it about him? And he went on to say, well, I just find that the populations in clinical trials are very homogenous, and I just don't find them clinically relevant at all. And I'm like, okay, well, how do you feel about real world evidence? real world studies? Do you find that type of information a little bit more clinically relevant and applicable? And he said, yeah, if you had any real world evidence, I would love to see that. So if I would have stayed on the path, and if I wouldn't have checked in with the person that I was talking to, this physician, my message was not going to go anywhere. This person was just shut off to it. And I needed to be able to recognize that. And I needed to be able to adapt, change course, check in with the person, see what's going on. And now the floodgates are open, and the two-way street of communication is back in business. So try to always be thinking, checking in with the person you're talking with, finding out how they're doing, if any of it's not making sense, and try to meet them where they are. That's what an effective communicator does. And again, you may be the most brilliant person in the world, but that doesn't make you an effective communicator. And a lot of the people that I've seen, I saw a lot of this in academia, these brilliant minds who were doing this research that was just way over my head, but they couldn't explain it. And they didn't understand that the message wasn't going through, and that they explaining it in this highfalutin, esoteric sort of jargon, it's not landing on the person you're talking with. You need to be able to adapt the message and find ways that people will respond better to. So that's tip number 5. Tip number 6, body language and gestures, AKA nonverbal communication. So this is something that also, I think more people who are just naturally a little bit more energetic, I think body language kind of comes naturally, but it can also be a detriment. Too much body language, too much gesturing, it can be over the top, and it can be distracting from the content or your message. So you want to find ways, and you want to get feedback on body language. If you're giving a big presentation or you have to do an interview, do a mock interview, do a dry run with a friend, with a trusted person, and body language, have them give you feedback on your body language. Are you doing too much? Are you pacing too much? Are you fidgeting while you're doing it, which is distracting to the audience? All of this is a part of communication. Eye contact is a big thing. So it's weird. I'm talking to you through a webcam right now, but I'm trying to act like that camera that's, facing, right towards me. I'm trying to act like that's an eye, and I'm trying to maintain eye contact with that. So that's also part of this, how your communication goes through, how the message gets transferred. All of these nonverbal things are things that are very important, and it's tough to quantify how important they are. But really, when I think about the body language and the importance of it, I think about it in 2 different ways. I think about it, number 1, first step is always yourself. So you have to find trusted people in your life to give you feedback on how your body language is, and refine it. Make little tweaks to it. I'm a person who I move around too much because I'm so energetic. So I got to find ways for me to refine my own body language by tempering it, not doing as much. And so that's step number 1. Step number 2 is then learning to analyze other people's body language. And again, meeting them halfway, reading the subtle cues of, is this person engaged with me? Is this person understanding where I'm coming from? Is this person checking their phone every 2 seconds? Is this person, kind of glancing at their watch to see how much time is left before they can see patients or go to this next meeting or get back to doing boring administrative work? Whatever it is, finding those ways to assess and analyze other people's body language. Quick story about this. There was an instance where I had a meeting with a physician, and for this meeting, there was an MSL who was riding along with me. And the whole purpose, the whole goal of this meeting was for me to facilitate an introduction between this MSL who was recently hired and newly joined the team. And I wanted to introduce this MSL with this physician. That's the whole point. And so we go into the physician's office, and there they are, standing behind their desk with a stack full of folders underneath their arm. And they're standing behind the desk, and the MSL and I walk in. We say hi, we shake their hand, and I introduce the MSL, and the MSL starts talking and introducing herself, and she starts talking about her research background. And she had to have been talking for no less than 5 minutes just about her research, her doctoral research, and then her postdoctoral research. And the whole time we are in this office, and the physician is still holding that stack of folders, and they are still standing. And eventually I intervene, thank the physician for taking the time, and we bid them adieu. Then in the car, I debrief with the MSL, and I checked in and I asked, how do you feel that introduction went? Is there anything that stood out to you? And they thought it went smooth. They didn't think anything was off. And they weren't interpreting body language, nonverbal communication, these kind of social cues. For example, it felt odd and awkward that we were standing there. And it was definitely telling that the physician, whenever we came into their office, that they did not sit down, nor did they invite us to take a seat. So they were standing the entire time, number one. They had the stack of folders underneath their arms. And the facial expression, you have to just trust me on this. It was looking like we were holding them hostage. And they just had that expression of, can we speed this up? I have patients to get to. I have work to get to. I didn't think that this was going to be a long thing. And to a physician, 5 minutes of talking about research, pie in the sky sort of stuff, that can seem like an eternity. So that's just an example of, we can all get better at analyzing others' body language and thinking, is this person invested? Am I taking up too much of their time? Are they giving me cues that my message is not going through? So that is what I would say is classify as tip number 6 for being an effective communicator. Body language, refining your own, but also finding ways to get better at analyzing others. Another tip that's been extremely helpful for me in the pharma industry, in personal life, as well as being proactive. So an effective communicator isn't somebody that's going to sit back and let something stew if there is a problem, or if there's just an instance of professional courtesy. So you have all these different routes of communication that's available to you. You have email, you have texting, you have phone calls, you have virtual meetings. There's no excuse for why you can't be proactive in communicating. So one of the most applicable ways of being proactive is the art of networking. So for some of you out there who are applying to fellowships or full-time gigs in pharma, you need to network. I can't stress it enough. You need to network. You need to be proactive with establishing and initiating communication with someone else that you don't know. So if I'm applying to this pharmaceutical company, you better believe I'm going to be hopping on LinkedIn, searching up that pharmaceutical company and finding employees that I want to pick their brain and hear what it's like to work for that company and hear how the job is done and just hear from them about what their firsthand experience has been. And that is all predicated on you being proactive. That conversation, nobody from the company is thinking, hey, I need to reach out to pharmacy students because some of them may want to know what it's like working in industry. It's all on you. These should be empowering things about ways you can be a better communicator. And being proactive is an easy one. It's just you taking the initiative and not being worried and not being concerned, about being a burden to somebody. And I actually had that whenever I had to get over that when I was in grad school and I wanted to network with people who were in pharma. I knew I had to do it, But I also, came from it like, oh, I don't want to be a burden to them. I don't want to take up too much of their time. And so I had to get over that. And the way I got over it was being upfront and being very clear about what your intentions are for why you're initiating that conversation. So if it's networking, it may be something as simple as, hey, Bill, my name's Mike. I'm a recent graduate from UT's College of Pharmacy. I'm super interested in the medical science liaison role, and I'd love to hop on a call so I could pick your brain about what it's like being an MSL at AstraZeneca. Let me know whatever time works for you, and look forward to hearing from you. You're making your intentions clear in that example. You're saying who you are, you're a recent graduate, and you're saying that you're interested in the MSL role. That's why I'm reaching out to you. And what's the worst that happens? They don't answer you? If that's the case, you're in the same exact position as when you started. So the worst case scenario really isn't that bad. And what do? Do you give up at that point? No, you're going to still be proactive. If Bill doesn't answer you, then you're going to reach out to Mary. And if Mary doesn't answer you, you're going to reach out to Jennifer. And you're going to keep going on. You're going to keep knocking on doors until you find one door that opens up and welcomes you with open arms and says, I would love to hop on a call. This date and time works for me. Let me know if it works for you. And now you're on that call, and now you're using all the other tips. You're researching that person who you're talking to. You've looked on their LinkedIn. You see their background. You have questions prepared for that informational interview. You're going to modulate your tone on it. You're going to know your audience. You're going to know this person's in pharma. This person is an experienced, employee. They've been in the industry for over 10 years. So you're going to know your audience, and you're going to tailor your message to that person, whoever it is you're talking to. But being proactive, it's something that should be empowering. Anybody can do this. Don't think you're a burden to anybody. We all do it. We all get to where we are because there are people who are in our corner who didn't have to be frank. They didn't have to spend time mentoring you or hopping on a call to talk to you. But I wouldn't be where I am without people who were generous with their time, but I wouldn't have found those people if I wasn't proactive. All right. So I'm going to stop talking there. I'm monologuing. Who here has any thoughts, questions of anything up until this point?
Definitely agree with being proactive. I think it's really helped me in my career so far. Obviously it's still early on, but definitely, taking initiative and also giving back as well. I think it's just really important. So
yeah. And this is like something that, again, this is what I love these tips for, because they can apply to situations like that. And they can also apply to just checking in with your friends, Also, if any of you are close with your parents, being proactive and calling your parents, letting them know you're doing well and you're safe and healthy, all of that jazz. Okay, I got to speed this up. I'm kind of waxing on too much. So tip number 8, the power of questions, active listening. So one just very easy tip of making people at ease when you're talking with them, making them comfortable, having the conversation go smoothly is I'm always thinking of questions. Whoever it is I'm talking to, doesn't matter if there's someone in my industry. I have questions that I'd love to ask them. If I'm meeting with a physician and it's a work meeting, I have a million questions that I'm curious about what their thoughts are. And then it's not enough to come up with good questions. It's also important that you're listening, of analyzing their communication. What are they emphasizing in their answer? If you're asking an open-ended question, which that's a big part of asking good questions. Think of who, what, when, where, why. So what was it about UT that brought you here? What do you like most about the pharmacy program at UT? Where were you before UT? All of these questions require more than just a simple answer. That's the whole premise of asking an open-ended question. So you want to avoid questions about, do you go to UT's College of Pharmacy? Yes, I do. Kind of stagnates. apply that to any type of question, any type of conversation. Think of thought-provoking questions as you're actively listening, you learn some new information, but there should be more questions that come about from whatever it is the person asked you. And you keep the conversation rolling through that. It's also helpful whenever you ask questions to preface your questions. So I find this important in job interviewing where they'll typically say, all right, Christopher, do you have any questions for me? And questions can tell you a lot about a person, what question they're asking. And you can tell, like, some people who don't understand a topic, they may ask a question that is, very simple. And people who are knowledgeable in that subject will ask a completely different question. So sometimes it's a good best practice to preface your question. Yeah, so I understand, the MSL role differs wildly between companies. Some want you to focus more on clinical research. Some want you more on responding reactively. Some want you focused on promoting the medication more. So I'm curious, at pharmaceutical company A, what does the MSL role look like, and what are specific internal work streams that you find that MSLs are playing a role in? Prefacing that question flexes subtly how much you know about the topic before you ask the question. And then it also clarifies what gap in your knowledge do you want them to fill. And that is an example of, okay, well, I understand the MSL role is different from AstraZeneca to a small startup company. So the gap that I'm wanting you to fill is, how is the MSL role utilized in this company? What type of tasks are they predominantly focused on? So that's the power of questions. Storytelling is going to be a big part of this. And so this is my 9th tip: finding ways to tell compelling stories. They don't have to be long-winded stories. Really, when you think about it, all you need is a 3-act structure. You need a beginning, a middle, and an end. In interviewing, I tell everybody to use the STAR method. It's actually technically the STAR method, but I love the 3-act structure, so I took out the T. So for me, I use the STAR method. What was the situation? What did you do? And what was the ending? If it's a job interview, it's always the situation is something where there's a problem. Tell me about this problem. What did you do to resolve the problem? And then in a job interview, it's always, we rode off into the sunset together and it was a happy ending. The things worked out. At the project, we were able to meet the deadline. I was able to resolve the conflict with my boss because of that. Whatever it is, but it's always a 3-act structure. This is universally applicable. It applies whenever you get good at this 3-act structure. It is like notes in a song, and you know exactly what notes you have to hit. I have to tell you, oh, it was a late night on a Friday. We were stuck downtown. Traffic was gridlocked. So I came up with the idea to take this route instead. And rather than hit the highways, which were all gridlocked, we went down these back little narrow alleys, and we were able to make it home in time, and all was well. That's a really, horrible example of this 3-act structure, but it still emphasized what was the problem, what did you do, what was the outcome. Very simple. Master storytelling, practice it. Whenever you go out with your buddies, hopefully you're sharing stories and funny stories that make you guys laugh, or make you ladies laugh, and you're just having fun. It's a 3-act structure. Take that to the bank. Last tip is seeking feedback from mentors. Mentorship is critical to your growth. Think of a mentor as someone who's more experienced, who is your professional work world best friend. It's somebody who has your back, somebody who can be real with you, somebody who can be honest, somebody who cares for your growth and development. They don't have to, but they genuinely care that you're making the right decisions for your growth. Find a mentor, and that mentor will be, I guarantee you, if you find a good mentor, it will be invaluable to you. They will give you advice. They will help you on your communication. I remember when I was first job interviewing for the MSL roles, and I'm stressed out. I am unemployed at the time, and I don't have no companies are giving me a shot. When I got my first opportunity, you better believe I had mentors identified. And so when I got word that I was actually going to be finally getting interviewed, I reached out to all my mentors and I said, "Hey, good news. I finally got an interview for an MSL role. Would it be possible for us to schedule some time where we could hop on Zoom and do a mock interview?" And I'm looking for all types of feedback. Anything that you see that's a red flag or something that I need to improve upon, I need you to tell me like what I need to do better. And they gave me feedback that it hurt. It hurt hearing, but I needed to hear this stuff. And it was coming from a place of support and caring. And so, certain feedback like, on camera, I can tell you're nervous because you keep going like this. I'm in a swivel chair. I had no idea I did that. So stuff like that where I needed to hear, or things like, I can tell you're nervous because you're speaking faster and you're actually over explaining. That's how I can tell you're nervous, Mike. So things like that are things that they hurt your ego a little bit, but you get better and you improve and you revise it. This is an overview of all 10. Your voice, knowing your audience, being mindful of your tone, preparing more than other people, being open to adapting your style, adapting your topics of conversation, all of that, mastering body language, being proactive, asking good questions, and then really listening to what answer the people are giving you and using that to kind of navigate through the conversation, mastering storytelling, and seeking feedback and finding mentors. So with that, that's all I got for you. I want to thank Jenny for inviting me to come on here and do this for y'all. This is all my contact info. Now that we're connected, reach out to me on any of these platforms, and I'm happy to be a resource for you.